Hello, grade 9s. Welcome to this online class where I'll cover the topics asexual reproduction and sexual reproduction. So let's get right to it. We're going to start off with the shape of the day or the shape of the lesson. We're going to first talk about asexual reproduction. What is asexual reproduction? What kind of organisms reproduce through asexual means? And then we're going to follow that with sexual reproduction. We're going to end this lesson today with zygote development. So this is a rather short lesson. It should only take about 5 to 6 minutes. First off, let's talk about asexual reproduction. Asexual reproduction involves one parent usually, and all offspring are identical to the parent. Now, when I say the term identical, I mean genetically identical. They have the same genes, the same DNA. So let's look at an example of this organism. This green tentacle-y structure, it's known as a hydra. And in the first image, you'll see a hydra. In the second image, you'll notice a small bud forming on the bottom of the organism. I've circled it in the red pen. You'll later notice in the third image that bud, it's getting bigger and bigger. It's starting to look almost identical to that parent hydra. And finally, in the fourth image, that bud, it just completely came off the stalk of the hydra, and that bud is now an identical copy of that parent. So this process is known as budding. There are different methods to reproduce asexually. One of them is budding. There are others that we'll cover right now. But before doing that, I have a question. Is mitosis a form of asexual reproduction? Mitosis, we talked in the previous video, and if you haven't seen that video, definitely check it out. In mitosis, a parent cell, it produces two identical daughter cells. So is mitosis a form of asexual reproduction? Essentially it is, because that one parent cell, it produced two genetically identical daughter cells. So we can consider mitosis a form of asexual reproduction. To give another example of asexual reproduction, let's look at this image of a red starfish. Sometimes when starfish are in the ocean, they can get attacked by predators such as fish or eagles. And that eagle or fish, it might rip the starfish in half. But starfish are unique in the sense that if they get ripped in half, that both halves may form two starfishes. And this process is known as fragmentation. There are other organisms that also asexually reproduce through fragmentation, but starfish is one of the bigger examples, more common examples. Next up, I have an organism with sunglasses. This organism is an amoeba. And amoeba also asexually reproduce. So in the slides, you'll see one amoeba, it turns to two amoebas, then two amoebas turn to 4 amoebas, and then 8, 16, 32, 64, and so on. So amoebas reproduce through a process known as binary fission, when one organism divides to produce two identical organisms. So these are 3 types of asexual reproduction that I've covered. There are more, such as spore formation, vegetative reproduction, but those I will not be covering in this video. Now, let's contrast asexual reproduction with sexual reproduction. First off, sexual reproduction often involves 2 parents. Also, the offspring produced from sexual reproduction are genetically diverse. They're not identical to the parents, and this is because of events that occur in meiosis. So let's look at an example. We have a biological female human, we have a biological male human, and their gametes come together. And once their gametes come together, eventually a baby is formed, a new organism that is genetically diverse from both parents. Its form is created. Now, you're wondering, how, Mr. G? How do these gametes get together? How do these gametes fuse? Well, there are two ways for fertilization to occur. Fertilization can occur internally when those gametes, they fuse inside the organism. And in these images, you'll notice the rhinoceros, the dog, the dolphins. These are organisms that reproduce or where they fertilize internally. Their gametes fertilize inside the organism. On the other hand, there are organisms such as frogs, seahorses, and fish. And in these organisms, the gametes, the egg and sperm, they fuse together outside of the organism. And this is called external fertilization. And we'll look at this into more detail in my next video. In the meantime, let's look at a few more images of organisms that reproduce through sexual reproduction. So there's a tiger. That tiger produces a cub. And there's also puppies, polar bear and its cub. So there are so many organisms. All mammals reproduce sexually. This is sexual reproduction. Next, zygote formation. So when we have that sperm and egg fused together, a zygote is created. So first off, sperm and egg are the products of meiosis. We covered this in the meiosis video. So if you haven't seen meiosis, the meiosis video, definitely check it out. And once the sperm and egg fuse, a zygote is formed. And once again, the sperm and egg, it can fuse inside the organism. That's known as internal fertilization, or outside, which is external fertilization. And the zygote divides to produce an embryo. With that being said, this concludes our video. Thank you for watching. In the next video, I'll talk more about embryo development. How is the embryo, such a tiny structure, how is it protected from predators or from the environment? And I'll also talk more about internal and external fertilization. Thank you for watching.